In recent years, we've seen a ton of innovation in the tactics game space, with indie devs and AAA publishers both throwing their hats in the ring to make the next cool thing. But what if the tactics sphere pushed into another style of game entirely, namely tabletop trading card games? Well, wonder no longer, because today we are talking about Eikonic TCG and how it's doing exactly that. My name is Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman, and welcome back to the channel. Hello everyone, if you enjoy what I do, including making you all aware of very cool new projects in the tactics space, such as Eikonic TCG, then a like on this video, a subscription to the channel, and consideration of checking out my Patreon would be very much appreciated. Thank you so much. Also, huge thank you and shout out to Divine and Eikonic TCG themselves for sponsoring this video. When Divine reached out and asked to sponsor a video for me to check out the game, I was more than happy to accept. I've spent my whole life playing card games, and I love them for the same reasons that I love tactics and strategy games. Starting off with Pokemon when I was a real wee little lad, to Yu-Gi-Oh!, to a wallet-devastatingly intense phase of Magic obsession, being able to express myself creatively while still engaging tactically with other players scratches an itch for me that's really hard to find a solution for elsewhere. And being able to do that now, but with the structure of like FFT or Fire Emblem, isn't something that I ever really expected to experience. Divine was gracious enough to send to Jane and I a couple of starter sets to play with, which I will quickly review near the end of the video, and I also did a playtest with him over Discord, so I've got some good playtime under my belt. Also, the Kickstarter for Eikonic just went live, so if you're interested by something that I have to say over the course of the video, use my link to go check it out, help the channel out a bit, and show an indie creator with a really cool project some love. So, with all that said, let's start with how the game works, shall we? Eikonic TCG is a tactical two-player trading card game that blends the positional depth of classic tactics and strategy RPGs with your more typical competitive card battling format. You take the role of a divine, summoning an icon around whom you build an army chosen from 6 elemental factions: black, blue, brown, green, red, and white. Your deck is what represents that army, with units to play and fight each other, skills that you have to actually cast from those units, more about that later, tactics that are more generally usable for more situational types of things, and bases that hold territory and give you other bonuses. To play your cards, the game uses a dual resource system of action points that you generate over turns, which is persistent to a point, you can save up to 3, and drive, which functions basically like your mana crystals from games like Hearthstone, or if you're more familiar with Magic, it's basically just mana, but you have a cap. The play map is just that, actually, a map. You don't have specific zones like Yu-Gi-Oh!, with an exception we'll talk about, or a sort of like amorphous blob of cards like a big Magic table can kind of turn into. Each space is essentially territory, and where you can deploy your cards is determined by Eiconic's most unique mechanic, and in my opinion, its most interesting one as well, the combat compass, which you can see here. Cards like units and bases have this compass on them that determines where other cards can be placed on your board. So a big part of your strategy is based on where you can expand your territory of control and how quickly you can do so to outmaneuver your opponent. You start off from your icon, who can deploy in pretty much any direction, for at least from the ones that I've seen, and where you can go from there depends on what you draw, what you've put in your deck, and how you want your strategy to play out. And really, this is where a lot of that feeling of a tactics game comes from, because being smart about your positioning and how you structure your forces is vital to protecting your icon from damage to keep you from losing the game. It also determines when and where you're able to use your various tricks, like the aforementioned skills and tactics. Skills function a lot more like individual unit abilities and their equivalents in other games. You know, like in Magic, if you're familiar, you can just cast a lightning bolt from your hand, and there's only so much your opponent can do about it. But here in Eikonic, a skill can, and often very much will, require that you have something like a mage or an archer actively on the field and in range of the target you want to cast it on, so you need to be positioned a bit to make that happen. Now you can contrast that with your tactics, which function a bit more like backline logistics or magical buffs, or sometimes get permanently placed in a dedicated zone on the field, that's that zone we talked about a minute ago, to trigger an effect regularly, like you're casting, say, haste on a block of units in FFT. Then of course you do have your actual units, which are pretty standard, I would say, if you compare them to creatures and monsters from other equivalent types of games. They all have different amounts of health, move range, and yes, you are going to be moving around the board. Again, this is much more of a tactics style experience, different skills and abilities, creature types, etc. that are going to change the way that they interact with both your icon and the other units and skills in your deck to modify the way that you're going to approach any given battle. Beyond these basic types of cards, though, you also have bases, which are a bit more unique. Bases are essentially fortifications or territory control units that will be able to put on the board as you've expanded your units forward, and that you will then be able to use as another foothold to continue expanding from, because you can only play units off of certain other types of cards, bases included. Well, not always. These are typically more defensive pieces, such as one which is basically just a ship that is immobile unless you control a water tactic, so you can go sailing, but your units that are connected base to base to it with the compass will be able to redirect damage that they take to the ship instead, so you have a nice defensive option to be able to wage a big war from until it eventually potentially gets destroyed, and there's a lot of these out there. Then, of course, you have your icon themselves, who's very much your hero unit of the game. Icons, as I'm sure you can imagine, are definitely quite powerful. If you've played any sort of RTS games where you get a hero unit, you kind of think of them in that way. They're not invincible, but they do a lot of damage. It can be a major tool in your arsenal, and they typically have a special ability that they can utilize when certain circumstances are met to help try and swing balance in your favor or push you even further towards victory. One of the two icons that comes in the starter set, which we'll talk about near the tail end of the video, is Kaya, Goddess of Fire, and her iconic ability is Dance of Searing Flames, allowing you to play a fire skill card from your hand without paying its costs. Obviously, just being able to throw out free fire spells is going to be good for destroying enemy units or weakening things, but then you also have another special ability. When an allied fire unit is captured, you can search the top 3 cards of your nation, which is your deck, for a fire unit and place it into your hand. So you have some sustain there as well that will allow you to continue to refill your hand with more dudes if you're starting to take losses, and in an aggressive deck like the Kaya deck is, that's going to be extremely valuable for you. And obviously, every different icon is going to have a swathe of different abilities that are going to set a play style that you're going to want to build around. All of that obviously means that you really have to consider your plays in a way that I've never really had to in any other card game, even though those also do get very strategic and tactical. But this is much more about positioning, timing, and where and when you've decided to play out different aspects of your army. And in speaking with Divine during the game demo that he did for me leading up to this video, that is very much intentional. He loves tactics and strategy games just as much as the rest of us. That's how he discovered my channel to begin with before reaching out to me with this offer, and he says he wanted to bring that feeling into the tabletop card game space. I gotta say, after playing for myself, I definitely think that that goal's been achieved. It's a bit of a learning curve just to get your head around all the rules, even as a tactics and strategy player and a card game player. But once you kind of get yourself to that point, it is extremely satisfying to play. And listen, I play Warhammer Tabletop. It's nowhere near that complicated. If you can handle learning how to play something like Magic, or God forbid, modern Yu-Gi-Oh! With however the heck that plays out nowadays, then you can handle learning this. You just got to rearrange your brain space a little bit. Of course, any good physical card game does come along with a lot of high quality art, or at least it's supposed to, and Eikonic definitely delivers in that regard. A lot of the art is actually done by Divine himself, and I really like the art that he's done for all of his cards, but there are a lot of other artists involved as well, and that means that there's a lot of different art styles that go into these cards. Now, some people might say that that's not a good thing. There needs to be a distinct style that goes into the whole game, but realistically, this is not a video game, right? Card games across time and space have commissioned a lot of different artists, sometimes hiring them on full time, to do art for their cards, and a lot of the time that's part of the joy of it. Seeing the artistic creation that goes into making the identity of a card through its art, and how it both meshes with but also stands apart from other cards in its color identity, creature type, or just in your deck, is really interesting and fun. And that spirit is very much alive here in Eikonic as well. It reminds me a lot of those early days of Yu-Gi-Oh! When you'd be opening up a pack for the first time, and half of the fun was just seeing what cool, crazy monster designs and styles there were, beyond just what they were able to do for you in a game. It's part of the reason that these cards are collectible, because the art is cool. And it's very heartening to see that that's something that's been taken into consideration here with Eikonic. As far as the physical cards themselves, I have some footage here, and I gotta say, they're very, very nice. As a point of reference, if you have ever handled a Yu-Gi-Oh! Card versus a Magic card before, Eiconic's cards definitely lean far more towards the side of quality of Magic than Yu-Gi-Oh! Some of those Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards, it felt like you could sneeze at them and you'd wind up with crease creases in them, whereas Magic cards can be pretty resilient. And that's definitely where the Iconic cards fall as well. They are also the standard size of a Magic card, so if you are someone who plays other CCGs of that size and format, then your existing sleeves will work perfectly well. The colors are vibrant, the art is clear, and while again there's a bit of a learning curve to learn exactly what all the various different symbols and types and numbers on the card itself mean, the layout of those things works quite well. I know there's been some one-off card games I've seen in the past where the actual format of the card itself is a nightmare to try and parse. Not so here. I think these are very readable cards, even if they are busy. These sets came with 2 starter decks designed specifically to play against each other, an actual cloth playmat, which is very nice, and a rule book because obviously you need to be able to understand the rules. The first deck, Kaya's Vengeance, is a red and black deck that, as you can probably imagine, is much more aggressive and focused around powerful creatures with good effects that are able to deal big damage to the enemy and try to be very aggressive, while the other is the Woodland Defenders green-white deck that, again, you'd be shocked to learn, is a little bit more about scaling into the late game, having defensive units, lots of healing to keep you on the board, and then some big powerful threats to be able to throw down once you've scaled into the end game. In the demo game that I played against Divine, I did play the Woodland Defenders deck, and it felt like pretty much what I would expect. Being someone with trading card game experience, I kind of knew what I was supposed to be doing and playing defensively, keeping my units healed up, and then getting a big threat online to be able to slam into my opponent once I was ready to do so, but still playing out in a very different way, a very unique feeling that made the experience very exciting. This is absolutely one of the most unique card game experiences I've ever played. And I can say for certain that I would love to see in like a year's time, this be something that there's a dedicated night for at my local game store, should the game get big enough and successful enough to be able to facilitate that type of thing. And there is a lot of deck building possibilities here. I mean, even just with the 2 starter decks that Divine sent us, if you really want to lean into hyper aggression, super defensive, low cost, tanky stuff, and a whole lot more. I can only imagine once you have access to a variety of different icons, all of the different colors in the color pie, and all the tricks that would come along with that, what tactics and strategy you'd be able to put into place. Again, as we mentioned at the top of the video, the Kickstarter just went live at time of recording today, so I of course encourage all of you to go and to check out the site. I do have a specific link for the channel in the description and the pinned comment that takes you right there. If you'd like to check it out, please do so. Of course, though, I'm curious about your thoughts. What do you think of the way the cards look, the gameplay sounds, the rules design, everything else? Let me know down in the comments. And Divine hangs around the channel, so if you have any feedback about the game for the team, you can drop it there too. Maybe it'll be something that'll be able to be implemented in the future. Just be polite. As always, be kind, be polite, be understanding. This is a work in progress thing. Thank you very much to Divine and the team behind Eikonic for sponsoring this video. It's been a pleasure to work with you. I can wish you nothing but the best. And of course, beyond anything else, thank you all so very much for watching. My name has been Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman. I hope that you all have a good night. Stay safe and healthy out there, everybody. And remember, be good to each other, y'all. Bye now.